Hello everyone and welcome to the latest in our monthly series of tea breaks. Hopefully everyone's got their favourite choice of hot or cold drink. I'm on the squash today for a change. Today we'll be chatting about digital, looking beyond the pandemic, based particularly on the Cultural Participation Monitor, which is the survey that we've been carrying out throughout the COVID period to understand the attitudes of the general public, whether they're arts attenders or not. So we'll be talking a bit about that, and also hearing from various colleagues about their perspectives on it, including hopefully yours. So do please join in at the relevant points. Just by way of introduction, I'm Oliver Mantell. I'm the Director of Evidence and Insight at the Audience Agency, and I'm a white, middle-aged, blonde-haired male. And so that's me, and I'll introduce you in a bit to my colleagues Elise and then Adam from our evidence and consultancy teams respectively. For those who want it, hopefully you've seen that there is live transcription available. So that's available directly through Zoom, or there's a link in the chat if you'd want to use the external version of that. Do please turn off cameras, keep on cameras if you want, but turn off mics during the session. Obviously do feel free to post questions in the chat, or indeed raise your hand if you want to ask a question on the way through, or indeed at the end we'll have a bit of a chance to share views and opinions. So just to say a little bit more about today's session, we'll start off talking about who is engaging with digital in terms of the overall population and trends, and then break that down a bit into a little bit more granular detail as we go through. So passing over in the first instance to my colleague Elise.
Thanks, Oliver. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the tea break. My name is Elise Boileau, and I am the Evidence and Insights Researcher at the Audience Agency. I'm a white woman with short, dark hair. And yeah, to get us started, as Oliver said, we're going to look at just broadly what did online cultural engagement look like throughout the pandemic. This was one of the key topics in the participation monitor. And what we're seeing roughly is that 2 in 5 people have been engaging with a certain set of cultural activities that we were asking about. And that's throughout the pandemic, so since March 2020, roughly. And these results are from our latest wave of the monitor, which was in November 2021. But we've seen this sort of 40 to 60% proportion sort of stay roughly similar throughout the pandemic. This is pretty typical. But what we have seen is that this proportion of the level of engagement that people have with doing cultural activities online has been declining a little bit. And we're seeing this here on the right. We asked if people did their activities in 2020 or 2021. And the proportion was quite a bit lower in 2021. And we also asked at each point of the participation monitor, at each wave that we've done, we were asking if they'd done activities in the last 2 months. And in the graph at the bottom there, we can see the line in red, that's the online activities, and that's been declining slightly. And we can see in contrast activities done in person. So that would be attending arts and culture or heritage activities in person. That's been increasing. So that kind of makes sense with how we remember the last 2 years have been going. You know, at first, some of the online activities were quite, were sort of the more available thing to do. And then slowly we were able to go back to in-person things. But what we decided for today was to look a little bit more at these people who've been doing things online and try to look at them through a different angle, which is what kind of online engagement they've been doing. So first of all, whether it was their first time engaging with an online cultural activity, or whether they'd done it before, but they were doing it more, or whether they were doing it less compared to before the pandemic. So we still have the same 60% non-engagers, but then we have the majority of the online engagers, we have people doing more or the same amount as they did before the pandemic. So that's those two big red bars there. Together 26% of the overall population this is nationally representative. So that means it's supposed to give an idea of the whole population. And we have up there in gray what we've called digital newbies, which are the people who, any activity they did during the pandemic, they did it for the very first time. They were not doing it before at all. And the small gray bar trying new things, that was people who had done some cultural activities before the pandemic, but they tried some new ones. So that's why we singled them out. So that's roughly the makeup of those digital engagers throughout the pandemic. And just to kind of clarify about what we mean by those cultural activities online, we were looking at 5 different types of activities that we gave people as choices. So there was watching a live stream or a performance or an event. There was taking a virtual tour that was related to a heritage organization, or a virtual tour related to a museum or exhibition. There was taking an online workshop, doing a sort of participatory activity, and finally viewing an online collection, archive, or library. So when we're talking about this 40% of the population engaging, we're talking about engaging in at least one of these five activities. And what we're seeing here is that performances and sort of watching a live stream or an event was by far the most popular activity. And what this the second bar inside the first bar represents is people who did this as their sole activity. So 13% only watched a performance, and whereas the full 23% is people who did a performance plus something else. So that kind of shows the prominence of live stream and events and watching performances within the whole sort of landscape of online activities that we're taking part in. So that's sort of a general overview of where we are and what the picture looks like. But now we're gonna look a bit more at what the different profile was of those groups that we've singled out, and some interesting differences in behaviors as well. So I'm handing back to Oliver now.
Oh, thanks, Elise. So yes, just to re-emphasize before we zoom into these, this sort of greater granularity, is just to make sure you've really got in mind who these different groups of people are, because we're going to refer to them quite a lot in the next few minutes. So the digital newbies, I think we found it quite interesting. This group is so small because there was some hope, I think, that switching things online would suddenly result in a big rush of new people, and it's really, we think, relatively marginal. And indeed, people aren't even diversifying their engagement very much. Really small group in the trying new things. So just hold that in mind when we then go into the more detailed picture. Clearly, where we did see big spikes in engagement, it was that mainly doing more people. So they're doing the stuff they've already done, but really going for it, so to speak. So that's our little pie chart in the top left as a kind of reminder of who we're talking about. But what we've got here is the profile of each of these groups relative to the overall population. So it shows you, do these groups tend to be more younger than other groups, or have higher proportions of people with disability, etc. And there's just a few things that I thought it would be helpful to pull out from that. One is, and it might seem surprising when we think about younger people being more digitally engaged, that in fact those who are engaging more aren't that much more likely to be in the younger groups. It's some of the other groups are the ones who are most likely to be engaging amongst the younger groups. So we see in that left-hand group, the 16 to 19-year-olds, trying new things is overrepresented. So there's people kind of, younger people branching out into some digital activities, but actually people doing less is also relatively more overrepresented. And what we think is going on here is that because younger groups were already more digitally engaged, in a way they had less headroom to kind of grow into in terms of digital engagement, or less of a propensity to engage the first time. So some of those groups maybe less represented, whereas amongst older groups, there's maybe more opportunity for that to be the case, although on average they are lower engaged, and therefore on average those bars are a bit lower. So hopefully that's clear in terms of that slightly mixed picture. We do get the impression maybe that those doing less, so all of those 3 pink bars you see for 16 to 19, 20 to 24 and 25 to 34, so the right hand bar, the pink one, it looks like some of the younger groups, they're highly engaged before, but probably there's all sorts of pressures that have been on young people during the pandemic, which may have affected that existing behaviour. So that's possibly what's going on there. We also see some marginal differences linked to deprivation level, but really not that stark considering, and some inclination that people with a disability may be less likely to be going online for the first time, probably because there's a relatively higher engagement amongst those groups already. But relatively speaking, more likely to be trying new things. So diversifying, because there's more of a restriction on what they're able to do. So that's the overall picture in terms of profile. We also asked people about whether they were likely to continue to engage with online activities in the next couple of months. So we asked this to absolutely everybody. So there are people in this group who were non-engagers who did still say, yes, in the next couple of months I might do something, but relatively small numbers. So those blue bars quite low. But it's notable, I think, that the dark grey bars, the digital newbies, are relatively less likely to engage in the future, in the near future, than the other groups who were engaging digitally during the pandemic. So there's a whole load of people who are kind of trying out digital stuff, but it really hasn't quite stuck for them. And so they're relatively less likely to engage. In a way, they're more similar to the group who are engaging less, the pink bars. It is worth noting that these absolute percentages are quite high, and I think we can be gently skeptical about whether people's intentions might actually turn into real attendance. But so really, it's more about the relative levels, I think, that's most interesting with these kind of things. Okay. Another question we ask people is whether in this next couple of months, they have things they want to do online, or they have a general interest in doing things online, but nothing in particular, or they're not interested. And then we can split these into people who, broadly speaking, said they were interested in doing something, the green ones, and people who said they, broadly speaking, weren't, and that's the purple ones. So for these green ones, we looked at whether, so treating them as a kind of people who are still now quite actively interested in doing digital stuff, what's going to happen once we get beyond COVID? Are these people converted to digital as a kind of the main thing they're going to do? Are they just doing it until they can get back to in person? Where does it lie? And the big headline is that for most of this group, they're expecting to blend digital and in-person engagement in the future. So it's not the case that they're doing it as a kind of temporary mainstay and they're going to completely switch off. It's not that they're going to stay online and ignore the real world. It's that it's going to be a bit of a blended experience. But there are some differences around the edges in terms of that. So people who had been engaging more than they previously had during COVID were, relatively speaking, more likely to say, actually, yes, I'm going to get my engagement from digital now. So instead of most of my physical visits. So that's that red bar that's sticking up on the kind of left-hand group. And the flip side of that picture is that the groups who are most likely to say, okay, we've done digital during COVID, but really, show's over, we're going to go back to just in person. The digital newbies, interestingly, had quite a high proportion of people in that group who, they dipped their toe, but now it's back to in person only. And of course, the non-engagers, you'd expect that to be relatively higher than other groups. So yes, so it does seem like digital is likely to continue to be important for those who have engaged digitally, which we've seen is 40% of people. But we also ask people, do you know about opportunities to do things? So again, it's just these green groups that they're interested. it's like, so are you aware of what to do? And for all of those groups, more people were saying that they sort of vaguely knew there was stuff to do, but they didn't really know exactly what, than were saying, yes, I feel like I really know what the available offer is. So that maybe suggests that there's room for greater building of awareness, or people becoming more confident in the options available to them. Of course, those who are more engaged are more aware, but maybe notable that there is a bit of there is still a bit of a gap there. Relatively few people assuming there isn't stuff to do. It's just they don't necessarily know what. So now let's finally look at these people who said that they weren't really interested in engaging in online stuff in the near future, and what was going on with them. Well, for this, we're just going to focus in on two particular groups. So the people who were the newbies, who tried digital stuff for the first time, and then the group who weren't engaged previously, to see if there's a bit of an attitudinal difference. And we gave people a range of choices about why they weren't that interested in continuing, but two in particular we've pulled out here. So the group who were newbies were much more likely to say it just doesn't match up to the live experience. So sort of, if you like, when needs must, fine, they'll switch to it, but actually they're quite, they're not that convinced and they'll switch back. Whereas the non-engagers, it was just never really on the cards. They were just never that interested. There's a reason why, even under duress, they never switched to online engagement. So again, there's a bit of a difference in attitudes, but really what we've seen is that the greatest prospect in terms of continuity is the groups who were already engaged, and particularly already engaged, and became more engaged in the course of COVID. So just to summarize before I hand over to Adam to tell us how this fits with the other things that this might mean. Just to recap, large minority who are engaging online. So digital engagement did get pretty broad coverage, but it wasn't particularly getting a new audience. It was relatively, it was only that sort of 7% of complete newbies. It's progressively dropped through COVID. That inflection point on the graph that Elise showed, where you got to the autumn and in-person stuff really opened up, digital really dropped off in terms of provision and indeed engagement. Streaming was a really big bit of the picture. In the next wave of the monitor, we've asked about a wider range of things to see if we've picked up anything that people have missed, but streaming has been really, really key. We saw that range of profile in terms of some people being some of those younger groups maybe varying, engaging more or engaging less, but not so much in between. There's a continued appetite for streaming, particularly amongst those people who are doing more or trying new things. However, people are rounded. They have a variety of interests and tastes and behaviours and engagement. If they're culturally engaged, they're interested in doing both digital and in person. It's not that one displacing the other. So people are likely to be hybrid in terms of the way they're engaging in the future. Possibly opportunities in terms of increasing engagement, increasing awareness. That might involve partnerships and collaborative working to really get high impact and high profile comms. And some different things going on in terms of why people might not be engaging. So if I had to boil it down to a single message, which will be, hopefully Adam will expand on rather, but broadly speaking, it is particularly this core group who were engaged, have been engaged, and will be engaged, but as part of a varied cultural diet. So digital will remain important, but it shouldn't be treated as something completely other. So over to Adam to do a little self-description and then sort of some reflections.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Adam Kazari. I'm the head of digital at the audience agency. I'm a white male with brown comb, with brown hair, and it's in a comb over. I've had this hairstyle since I was 10 years old, I think, and a poor attempt at facial hair. And I'm probably at risk of probably repeating a lot of those summary points because I came to many of the same conclusions. I think the first thing I latched onto was that almost precipitous decline of engagement with online content from the very first slide. But I think as people are returning to on-site visits, we also don't know how much content organizations are producing. Because we all know when the pandemic began, we all just turned to digital. Everyone was pumping out content as fast as they could. And I think as time has gone on, we've refined our offer and we've reduced the effort we're putting into digital content as we've had to pivot back to welcoming audiences back on site, essentially. So I'd be interested as time goes on, whether that levels out or even whether it starts to come back up, because I've seen a lot of organizations also reflecting what they've done in the pandemic, realize they need a bit more of a strategic approach and professionalize some of the content they're producing, which might be bringing back more of those skeptics. So that will be interesting to see whether we become essentially a bit less ad hoc and experimental, and if we start to get into this groove and build that reputation with the audiences that this is a consistent offer that we're going to have from now on. It's not just a random thing we did because we're all at home, but you should come back. If we go to the next slide, I've got some points which vaguely refer to things on here, I think, because it goes back again to what we all turned to when the pandemic began. We essentially looked at what we had planned. We looked at what our usual offer was. We tried to find ways of just putting that online. I'm interested in whether we start to see more nuance in that content. So it's less, here's a recording of an entire show, we'll put it on Facebook, we'll put it on YouTube, but actually whether we start looking at content around those events and exhibitions. So it's not just, here's something you would have seen in person but online, but it's a bit more nuanced, and there's behind the scenes and digging into the detail and things that you won't be able to see in person but online, and whether that would actually be of more interest than just something people could come and see in person, which, as we've seen, I think on this next slide, yeah, it's not an attractive alternative to live events. It's about how we build on that live events to make it useful for people to be seeing this online content. We're never going to be able to replace a exhibition or a performance. We need to complement it. But looking ahead, I think back on the previous slide again. Oh no, sorry, I forgot to ask to put this one in. But Ollie's points are that the audiences of the future are skewing to the younger. So while there's less take-up among older audiences, there's not to say that we should stop investing in it, because as those age groups keep advancing, as time inexorably does, we all need to be serving them with what they're interested in, the way they behave online. But that core marketing needs work. There are people who are interested in trying these new things, but here in this bottom graph, not necessarily knowing the options. So there's a lot more work to be done of just keep hammering home that there's a consistent offer here, and it's not just one-off things that you might just see pop up every now and then, but become knowing as almost online producers as much as the physical side. And a lot of this data has been very interesting to me because it comes back to this big question of whether digital content replaces the physical visit. And for me, this data is saying no. And when I say that, I mean, whenever you used to go to people and say, we'd like to say, put a lot of this exhibition online, have a live stream with the events, directors and other people would often say, well, that will just stop people coming in person, and we need people through the door, and we need that money. I think what all of this data is saying that actually is people want some sort of complimentary offer, but they don't expect you to just recreate what they would have come to see in person. It's all about adding value, but that value needs to be of high quality, because we're seeing here also in this data that people are seeing that it's not necessarily their thing. Some people are being put off. And I think that's because of the raised expectations that we've all had through the pandemic. We've all gone to Disney Plus. We've all gone to Amazon, buying things off Amazon. Things are very easy and slick and of a certain bar of quality. I've been working on a project recently with a council museum service who weren't allowed to use Zoom and had to force people to go through Microsoft Teams to get onto their live events, which meant signing up for a Microsoft account, going through loads of hurdles, and people just dropped off in droves because you need to make that an easy process, because people expect to be able to just click and get to the thing they want to see or watch. And as a final extra point, there was a slide about how there was more engagement among disabled audiences. I think we've got to remember that it's not just about producing more stuff for the sake of it. Having online content serves a wider purpose of accessibility, where there are people outside of your physical location, there are people who might not be able to make it to you or even be confident enough to leave the house. This content is there for them as well. It's not purely about just replacing everything you're doing. It's serving that accessibility purpose, which doesn't feel like a very strong message to end on, but those are my comments essentially. Are you on mute, Ollie?
The host and I keep trying to mute and unmute me, and we keep sort of, I ended up muted each time when sort of each of us clicked the button. Yes, thanks, Adam. So yeah, so hopefully a few interesting things to think about there. Obviously, we're really keen to hear your thoughts and your experiences, and of course, your reflections on what we've said. And does it ring true? Does it line up with your experience in terms of the proportions of completely new audiences? Are there things that you've tried that you think have really worked? Are there things that you're planning to do in future? I noticed in the chat that Lee from Norwich was saying that you're looking to do more digital stuff in future. So I'd be kind of interested to hear more about those who are looking that direction, but also those who maybe are thinking about how to work together to get that kind of joined up impact. So I think one of the things that we maybe had in the pandemic was everyone was sort of in their own particular boat trying to solve digital, but now hopefully as we move towards a kind of longer term view, there's maybe room to kind of work together to get audiences as well. So does anyone have anything they'd like to share from their point of view, or experiences, or indeed just straight up questions?